Hello everybody, welcome back to Rainandpours. I'm Mitch and today I'm doing something a bit different for me. I'm going to try some resin art on tiles. Now, I'm not going to do the traditional resin art painting, but I've just got in some really awesome glitter flakes and I want to try and create some opal-like coasters. So these are inspired by Raina, the Witch of WTF. Good friend of mine. Check her out. Check out her YouTube channel and share the love around. Check out her website and her Facebook page as well, because she created these amazing resin coasters that she called Cozumels, and they looked absolutely freaking amazing. They blew my mind, and I've been wanting to try to make something similar for a very long time. Opals are some of my favorite things on the planet. I think they're the most beautiful natural stones, and so I'm a little bit obsessed with making everything rainbow and pretty and sparkly just like opals are. So I've got a couple of sets of tiles here that I'm going to use. Just laying these all out. And I'm going to use a similar process to what Raina has done, except I'm going to be doing these directly onto the tiles. So what Raina's done is she has poured the layers of resin into a mold, and I did have resin molds here, but I'm sending them back because they were really flimsy and they weren't small enough to actually fit into the mold holder, like into the coaster holder. So those are going back, and I'm hoping I can get some decent ones soon. So if you know of any decent resin molds, please link them to me or send them to me. I'd love to know, because this is something I would like to do. So the colors that I have, I'm super excited. I ordered these from the Glittered Pixie, or Glittered Pixiez, on Etsy, and they're from the USA. And they just arrived this morning. And I have a selection of colors of iridescent flakes. So you can see there's some pink to white, there's blue, purple. I've got all sorts of rainbow holographic different colors here. I've got 7 or 8 bags in total, and these were an amazing price, and there's an ounce in each bag, so 30 grams, and these should last absolutely forever. Like I'm never in the foreseeable future going to run out of these. So my goal today is to just mix up a couple of batches of resin, or one small batch, and then I'm going to add the glitter to the surface on each one. And I'm going to see how these look over a white base. The other thing I want to do is to mix in This Little Piggy macaw as my base color for all of these. So I'm going to mix up the resin with the interference pigment, and then I'm going to blob my resin onto the tiles. And then once the resin's on the tiles, then I'll add the glitter flakes and smear them around. So I'm going to give that a go rather than mixing everything into my cup. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure out my hardener. And when I do this, I'm doing incredibly thin layers of resin. So normally I would do 10 milliliters of resin per coaster. I'm not going to do that with these. I'm going to do 5 milliliters per layer, because ultimately I'm going to layer these up multiple times. So I'm going to measure 50 milliliters of hardener. Just making sure all of my resin is fully incorporated, that I've been stirring this for the 3 minutes recommended by the Stonecoat Countertop Epoxy. And just for anybody watching, this is the epoxy that I'm using, the Stonecoat Countertop, or Stonecoat Epoxy. It says heat resistant on the front. This is the one that I use, okay? They do have multiple variants. They've got an art coat, they've got all sorts of different applications. So the Stonecoat Countertop, or the Stonecoat just regular epoxy that says on the bottle, that's what I am using. Okay, so that's been mixed for 3 minutes now, and I'm going to pour out little blobs of resin onto each coaster. Now I may need to heat this up slightly, so that it flows better. I really wish you could see the amazing shimmer that's coming out of this TLP macaw, but the camera just doesn't seem to want to pick it up. A bit of something on that tile there. Got a bit of resin left, so let's dish that out to some of these. Alright, I'm going to heat these up and try and get them a little bit more fluid. Now with these, I am not so much interested or worried about bubbles forming. I actually want that to happen. That's going to give some depth and dimension to these coasters. So now I'm going to take my flakes. These are called Phantom. Again from the Glittered Pixiez. And let me just try and show you the interference coming off these. I'm afraid you can't see it at all. Okay, so my goal here is to just pick out some flakes and put them down. That's one base, and then on this side I'm going to do a different base. Let's go with Crushed Mystic Topaz. This one. Crushed Mystic Topaz. So my goal here is to create a couple of layers of resin, really thin layers, and use the different flakes on each layer and just build those up. So with each layer you're getting a different colour. So I am going to sprinkle some of this onto our flakes here. Going to add a little bit of depth. Okay, now let's use my normal technique of smoothing this around. I do want to lightly coat the sides, the resin, but not necessarily with the large chunky flakes, because the large chunky flakes will become a problem for the resin setting on the edges. That looks spectacular. Oh, again, once these are covered, I'm going to use my heat gun just to move the resin around a bit, help it flow. I can't see any bubbles. You won't see bubbles with this because of the glitter. And it's doing exactly as I wanted it to. That Crushed Mystic Topaz is throwing off an amazing orange, pink, iridescent colour shift. And those big flaky chunks of the diamond, was it? The Phantom. That's throwing off those interference purple and silver and green. So with each thin layer of resin I do on these, I'll add a different colour of flake. And one that should add a bit of depth. And two should add a whole lot of different random colours into the mix. Okay, so that's all of the coasters done. Now I do have a little bit of resin left in my cup. So the next thing I want to use is another interference color. And this time I'm going to put Comet, PLP Comet, in with the macaw. And I do have only a little bit left in there. And the reason I'm using Comet, so macaw is a blue to gold color shift. Comet is red to gold. So that should give us that beautiful gold and then some streaks of red through there. And this I'm just going to drizzle over the surface. And again, remembering this is only layer 1 of our tiles, of our coasters. So each layer is going to have a different interference color, and I may only put it in certain spots. So the next layer I may only put the interference color on the corners. I'm not fussed about this blobbing down. I'm not fussed about where it's going. These aren't meant to be perfect. And they're not all meant to be the same. What I am just trying to do is making sure they each get an equal amount of resin on each coaster. So now that that's done, I'm going to use my heat gun to push that around a little bit. Okay, so all I did there was I moved the, I heated up the resin enough that the solid lines are moving away from the surface. So where I drizzled that paint, that macaw pigment on, where I drizzled the Comet pigment on, it's not just straight flush lines. So it's sort of melting into each other a little bit. That should move and settle as the resin cures. So we will leave that, and we will come back in about 24 hours and we'll see what we can do about a second layer. Okay, so it's now day 2 after I've poured the first layer of resin with the glitter in them, and the coasters are looking marvelous. So let me just turn off one of these lights so you can actually see. Look at that gorgeous sparkle in there. So this one has the color shifting flakes in there. So what did we use yesterday? The mystical topaz, I think it was, from memory. Let me see. So we used Phantom, which is the bigger ones on that one, and yes, the crushed mystic topaz. So we're going to put those aside for now, and we're going to use a different color on the next layer. So this is the prism one. Is that what it was? Prism? Phantom. Okay, so you guys can't really see the amazing color shift that's happening here. The camera's just not picking it up, which is really disappointing, but you can sort of get a glimpse of the purples and the silver coming through that. Okay, so the next layer that we're going to pour, I'm going to use, what do I want to use? So we want something that's a little bit contrasty to this, but that's still going to show up. And I also want to add a little bit of color in here. So I'm thinking maybe to add interference blue, and I'm going to concentrate, like make that really concentrated so it actually stands out. So I might put that just on the edges, just in some splotches. So I may do it the same way that I did yesterday. I'll mix up the resin first, pour that on, smear it on, mix the glitter in, and then I'll mix in the interference color and put that around the edges. So let's give that a go, okay? Now this layer, I'm going to mix the same as I did yesterday. I think I will do maybe a little bit less resin, so maybe 60 mils should be plenty. And I think 60 mils is the lowest I can actually accurately mix with my measuring cups, because they only start at 30 milliliters. So that's the first accurate measurement I can get. I think that's what I decided yesterday. We'll just do that. Heaps of bubbles in here, but it's nice and thick, nice and viscous. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to mix in the interference color. No, we're going to put on little blobs first, then mix in the interference, because I don't want the interference everywhere. Oh, that one's not level. So doing some blobs bigger, some blobs a bit smaller, making them all look really nice and unique and individual. And doesn't look like I've got enough resin at all. Maybe 60 milliliters wasn't enough. Okay, so what I might have to do is on the next layer I'll do the interference instead. So this layer will just be a glitter layer. Could even be just a clear layer, to be honest. Do a clear layer, let this dry, then do another glitter layer. That would really add some depth. That should be a really good idea. But we're not going to do that. Okay, I'll put Velvet away for now. That's the interference color I was going to use. Let's go with the Rainbow Connection glitters that I have. Pop that open. I'm just going to use my stir stick to put a little bit on there. I don't want to overdo each layer with glitter. I do want a little bit on there, but not too much. So this one might be a little thin layer. We'll see how this spreads out. And one thing to remember is that the chunky glitters are going to make your resin layers uneven. This one is quite a chunky glitter. But this one is refracting all the colors of the rainbow, which is beautiful. And as you can see, a couple of my coasters have a lot more resin than others. That is actually going to add to the effect, because that will then mean that certain layers are going to get more resin than others, but then when we do the next layers, it's going to even everything out. This one's a sort of have faith in the process kind of application. Again, not too fussed about the sides, because that will all get done layer by layer, but you do sort of want to be covering them as you go. A little bit more resin on this one, and yeah, just want to get a nice even coat throughout each application. You can see those glitter, that chunky glitter floating on the top there. And again, this is one of those, just trust it, layer by layer you'll build it up, the resin will level itself out, and will eventually coat the whole thing. The one thing you do want to look out for is that you're just making sure that the layers are relatively even. If you do have a massive dent or divot near the edge, the resin will tend to take that shape. So just try and make sure your edges are pretty well covered. Anything in the center, the resin will self-level and fill that in. So yeah, I'm going to speed through this and we'll come back for step number 3. Okay, so that is all of the glitter layers applied. And I have decided I am going to mix up just another batch of the interference pigment, and I'm going to do that straight over this layer. So the amazing thing with Stonecoat resin is you have such a long working time with it. You've got about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to work. So if you do need to mix up another little batch, you can do that. Okay, so to this one, I'm adding my TLP velvet and really piling that in. So I've added in about a teaspoon worth into 60 mils of resin. What I should be left with is an opaque milky white mixture. It's going to have a really nice blue color shift. I'm going to drizzle this on. So the other two layers I did yesterday, the Comet and the Macaw, they were to give a base layer of interference so that so it's not just plain white and you don't really see them in there. So with this layer, I'm hoping that we're going to get a really nice layer of blue color coming through. And then with each subsequent layer of resin that we're putting on there, we'll just add, you know, another color of glitter, another interference color, another color of glitter, another interference color. So because the interference colors are transparent or semi-transparent, we should be able to see through them, and they will sink slightly through the resin, so we'll get some really nice effects happening with that. Alrighty, and again, just going to drizzle this on. Some I'm just doing the corners, some I'll drizzle all the way through. Just making some interesting shapes and trying not to overdo it. So when I blow this with the heat gun, that should make everything melt in nicely. So for the next layer, I'm going to mix up 100 milliliters of resin, and I'm going to put 60 ml roughly onto the coasters, and then the other 40 milliliters I will put with the interference color, because what I'm finding is now I have a lot of interference resin left. So what I might do is, just so I'm not wasting that, I'm going to make another tile. So the idea with these is you want to put your chunky glitters down on the bottom layers, because then your top layers are going to smooth that out. Wow, that Medusa glitter is really, really fine, going everywhere. Okay, so now I'll heat these up. So heating those up to get the resin flowing and to get that interference color moving around a little bit so it's not pulled in one area. And then I'm going to torch just to get any bubbles out. Okay, and that is layer 2 ready. Okay, so you can't really see anything. Okay, this can't really see much in here, but okay, there we go. So you can see there when I tilt it this way, you get that really lovely interference blue with the glitter sparkling there. So let me focus. Okay, So here you see just white, and then when you turn it, you get that blue interference with all of that interference color sparkle underneath. Now, if you can tell, the surface here is rough. You can see all those pits and dents and things. That's the glitter making the resin uneven. So that's why I said put your thick glitters at the bottom as your base layers, so that your other layers on top, your glitter layers and your clear coat, that's going to make everything nice and smooth, and it's going to make the final finish look like glass. Alright, so I'm going to let these cure, and I will see you for part 3, or layer 3. Also, just before I go, make sure that you're cleaning up the edges, and you don't want any chunky glitter sticking out from the sides, because if you have that, it will make your edges sharp, and you don't want that to happen. Don't want anyone to cut themselves on your coasters. Okay, so we're now back for part 3 of the Opal coasters. This is day 3, part 3. Just getting my gloves on, and I'm really liking how they're turning out so far. I'm liking the coasters with the smaller glitter in them a little bit more than I am the ones with the bigger ones, the bigger glittered particles. I just think that the smaller ones are a little bit more subtle and a little bit more opal-like than the big pieces, but they're still beautiful, still really nice, and I am happy with how they're turning out. So I'll give you an example of what I was saying about putting the bigger glitters first. You can see a lot of texture on this. So that surface is nowhere near smooth, so you couldn't use that for a coaster. I wouldn't sell that. It's really rough, and it's just because the glitter is all clumped up here and it's all sticking out into the top. So the next layer of glitters that I'm going to apply are just going to be the small flaked glitters. And I'm going to use the Medusa that I used a little bit of yesterday, because that turned out really well. And I'm also going to use the Mystic Topaz again. I think that as the second to last layer will look really nice. And I may also mix in a little bit of Illuminate, I think. So judging from what's in the bags, the Medusa and the Mystic Topaz are the smallest cut glitters. And then we have Illuminate, which looks like it's cut maybe a medium cut. And then I've got the Spectralite, which is also a medium. And then the other three that I have, the Galactic Prism, Rainbow Connection, and Phantom, those are all a large cut glitter. So they are important things to take into account when you're mixing up your resin and which layers you're putting them in, because they will ultimately affect the final, smoothness of the surface. So at this stage, I'm also going through and just trying to take off any bits of large glitter that may be hanging over the edges, because like I said, they will end up in a rough finish, and you don't want that on the edges. You don't want your customers to be cutting themselves because there's a bit of glitter sticking out on the side. Just double checking all of that, making sure all of the coasters are nice and smooth on the edges. And I may even need to paint the sides, because you can see that it's just a raw edge of the tile. So that may be something I will have to do, or I could go over it. I might actually go over it with my silver pen, because that's something that I've got. So I'll do that last. Okay. So let's mix up our resin. So again, really cold in here overnight, so I'm just going to heat up my resin with the blowtorch, with the heat gun. That should do it. Okay, so all I was doing was using my heat gun just on the outside of the bottle, never keeping it in the same spot for longer than a couple of seconds, and just rolling the bottle around so that the resin is moving. So if I'm doing this, I'm rolling the bottle, making sure the resin is flowing around the outside so that it's all heating evenly. Okay, I really wish Stonecoat would come up with a pump system for their resins, because that would be super handy. Oh no, have I just done a thing? Did I just do a bad thing? Oh no, okay. I may have done something very bad. I think I just put I did what I did the other day, and I put the lid for the resin on the hardener which will be very bad. So I'm going to wipe that off completely with isopropyl alcohol. You never ever want to swap the lids on your containers, because if you do, you will fuse the lids onto the container and you'll never get the resin out. You'll never get those lids off again, so don't do that. Okay. So part A is the white lid. Lucky I checked, because I put part B as the white lid. Part A is the white lid, okay? The resin. I've actually got about much. Alright, so let's go with pouring in our resin. When you're measuring this, you don't want to pour down the side of the cup. You don't want to pour down the side of the cup, because any resin there is going to collect and it will slowly drip down, so that anything you've poured directly into the center of the cup, you're going to get an accurate measurement from that. But then anything that's still dripping down the sides, you may overdo it or underdo it. So you just want to be careful of that. And again, a couple of milliliters of difference isn't going to cause major dramas, but that depends on how much you're actually mixing up. Now with this layer, I'm not going to put any interference color in. I'm just going to keep it as the glitters, because what I found is that on the white, I'm not really seeing the interference coming through. I can see that it's there and it's a little bit cloudy, so it does add an effect, but it's not actually showing through. So I'm going to leave it and not put any glitter in this one, any interference color in this one. So this will just be a clear layer with some glitter in it. And then tomorrow when I do the last layer, that's going to be a final clear coat only. There's not going to be any glitter in that. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly what I have been doing. I'm going to pour this resin on. And I want this layer to be a little bit thicker than what I have been pouring. Just because I want this now to fill in all the cracks and crevices that I may have left underneath. And this is also going to act as the second to last layer. So this will be covering all the sides. This will be filling all the dents and divots. And then the last layer on top is just going to seal everything in. And that last layer is going to be a pure clear layer of resin. So as I was saying earlier with the edges, to finish these off, what I will do tomorrow, I will let this cure, this layer, so this is layer 3. I'll let layer 3 cure, and then I will come back a day later. So tomorrow I will come through with my chrome pen. I have a chrome pen that I use for detail work, and I will touch up just the sides. I will just run the pen along the edges to hide the tile. And then on Friday, so it's currently Wednesday, on Friday I will come back once that's had a day to dry, and I will put the final layer on. And then that last layer is going to be the barrier. So technically, Stonecoat countertop epoxy that I use is rated for food safety. However, when you add glitter to it, it no longer becomes food safe, because the glitter is no longer food safe. So the only reason that is because if there's any little bits of glitter sticking out of the top that are not coated by the resin, they are not classified as food safe. There is a chance that they can come free of the mixture and embed themselves in the food. So that's why we want to do a final coat on these, to make sure that if you are using them for anything that's going to contact food, so you could do this technique on a cheese board or a platter or something like that, but you would need to put that final coat on top just to keep it food safe. Now on the topic of food safety, I am a chef. I know all about food safe products and what to use, what not to use. oftentimes resin products will be rated food safe for incidental contact. And what that means is you can put the food on there for a short period of time, but it's not recommended to, how can I say, it's not recommended to prepare the food on that surface. So I've seen a lot of people making chopping boards out of wood and then adding a resin coat on top and serving them as chopping boards. That's technically incorrect. You can't actually sell them as chopping boards because the resin is not rated for food preparation. The resin is rated for food service and incidental contact. So that means you could definitely use it as a charcuterie board and have cheeses on there and food displayed on there for a little bit. I'd say maybe an hour or two. The food is not, once the resin is cured, that is no longer giving off a chemical reaction. So it's not going to impart anything into your food. It becomes inert, so it's not going to react, and it is safe to put food on there. So if you are worried about serving food on these items that you create, so obviously you wouldn't on a coaster, but if you are worried about that, don't be. You can serve food on them, you just can't chop. And one of the main reasons they say not to chop on these resin surfaces is because resin isn't very strong, so it's durable, it will resist scratches. But if you are purposefully hacking at it with a knife, it's going to cause little chips of plastic to fly off and embed in the food. So that is why it's not food safe for preparation. So as I'm doing this layer, and I believe it's the illuminate fragments, they are throwing off some serious reflection and diffraction here, and they're just making these absolutely stunning. So I will show you the final product at the end, but I'm so happy with these glitter flakes. They were such a good purchase. So I will link to the place that I got these from in the description below. Show them some love, buy their products because they are stunning. They're really amazing. I did wait a couple of months to get them, but it is so worth it. Alright, so this particular coaster... Oh! Disaster! This particular coaster has a fleck of glitter that is sticking up. It's hardened. So I'm going to have to sand that back on the next coat before I put the final coat on top. Okay, you don't ever want to have to sand on the final coat because it's very hard to get that back up to the amazing shiny polish of a fresh coat of resin. So always try and do that second to last if you need to sand. So you can definitely see where the surface tension of the resin is pulling on the glitter. And it's forming little pools on the surface. They're not all completely even. So if you can see that on the left hand side there, the surface is not flat. And that's natural because you've got glitter flakes in there. They are pushing up on the surface of the resin and causing it to dent inwards. So don't stress about that. That's what we're going to fix on the last layer. And if we need to do another layer on top of that, if there are still dents, then so be it. So I will come back and I will see you tomorrow for the last layer, we hope. Okay, so I'm cutting to my face now because it is now day 7 after I started making these coasters, and they are finished. I've just put the finishing touches on them. So I went ahead, took all the tape off, added the cork and branded them. These will now cure for a couple of weeks before I put them on the website. So let me show you what I've done. So these are the finished coasters. Look at that gorgeous glittery shimmery sparkle in there. So when they catch the light, they really sparkle and change color. You can see all that luminescence and the iridescence in there. This one has the bigger particle flakes that I put in those bottom layers, and this is one that does not have them. So you can see that there's none of that silvery reflection in there. And depending on how the light strikes them, just depends on which colors you get reflected in there. So from far away, they don't look like much, but then up close, when you get all of those really beautiful colors reflecting and shimmering, they're amazing, and they actually look like an opal. So the Glittered Pixiez is where I got my glitters from. They're on Etsy, so if you want to check those out and get yourself some of these. Now these are 1 ounce bags, and they are going to last me forever because I don't usually use glitter in my projects. So this is going to last me a very, very long time. And I used a minuscule amount, like I didn't even use 1/4 teaspoon of glitter of each one for any of the coasters. So that's going to last a very, very long time for me. Now, a couple of things I would do differently. Because these were all resin and there was no paint, when it came time to taking the tape off the bottom, it was really difficult and I had to heat each one around the edge so that the resin softened. When you paint and you apply the resin, the paint acts as a barrier against the tile, and when you peel the tape off, you're actually taking that layer of paint, and that causes the resin to come with it. So I would paint these white, even though they're a white tile, I would paint these white first and then apply all the glitter and the resin on top. Now I do like how many layers there are in there. I do like that there's a bit of depth. However, I do think that it's a bit unnecessary, and I could probably get away with only 2 layers of resin. One being a layer with all of the glitter in there, in which case I just mix it straight into the resin, and then the second layer being a clear coat on the top. Yeah, I do like how it looks. I do like the final effect, but it was a lot of resin to use. I used, I think, about 1 liter of resin for this, and that made me 16 tiles. So that is quite a lot of resin compared to what I normally do, considering each coaster I normally do only has 10 milliliters of resin on there. So 160 milliliters compared to an entire liter. But yeah, it was a fun little project. I enjoyed doing this, coming back every day and adding a new layer, but not necessary. If you were doing these in coaster molds, that might be a little bit better of an application for this technique by using the different glitters and things in there. But yeah, give it a go, see what you can do with this. You know, it's glitter in resin is nothing new, but these glitters that I have ordered, and I think they're actually Mylar flakes. I would have to check the Etsy shop for that, but I'm really happy with how they turned out, and if you'd like to give it a go ahead and do that. Alright, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're liking what I'm doing here, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!